Hello and welcome to the Getting There Show, where we speak with brilliant people and unpack the key influences and decisions that have helped them get to where they are today. You'll get the books, the mental models, the inspirations, and all the steps in their journey to help guide you on your own path. As Isaac Newton said, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Today's giant is an amazing guy called Thomas Ropel, who after several years at Google and armed with degrees from 2 business schools, is now co-founder and CMO at Sellics, a leading platform that helps e-commerce companies succeed on Amazon. Thomas is a good friend of mine as we started at Google together. And this episode is full of insights for those interested in getting into Google and into big tech more generally. Tips and tricks for acing any interview and performing on the job. Thomas goes into the framework that he uses to prepare for interviews and then stand out once he's in the role. And trust me, this guy talks the talk and walks the walk. I saw firsthand how he was able to climb the ranks at Google so quickly and effectively. We also cover the importance of staying hungry and staying foolish. As always, we make sure to include all of Thomas's toolkit and influences in the show notes, so as to maximize the chances that this helps you get to where you want to get to. Thomas, how are you doing?
I am very good. Thank you for asking. How are you?
Yeah, it's been a long time. In fact, the last time I was drinking vodka and Coke, you were taking a lot of money from me over the poker table.
That is true. These are good old days.
Very good old days. So you're in Berlin at the moment?
Yes. Berlin, Germany, beautiful city. Right now, we're obviously a little bit in a crisis again, but other than that, it's a great city.
Why? Because of the COVID numbers are rising?
Yeah. So we're going to have many challenges around that, right? But overall, still a great place to be.
Excellent. And how long have you been in Berlin for?
So I've been in Berlin back and forth. I've been here a couple of times, right? But now I lived here again, I guess. I have been living here now for 5 years, pretty much, right? So yeah, it's a city that always, got me back. It's just, I think, amazing city.
It's a very magnetic place, hey?
Yeah. No, definitely. Many things happening, lots of possibilities, great people, obviously very vibrant startup ecosystem, many cultures. So good place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I lived there in 2006, I believe. I was there when Barack Obama did his famous Ich bin ein Berliner speech.
Very good. Yeah, then you probably paid for the rent a third of what you would pay now, right?
No, yeah. I've heard it's got way more expensive over the years.
It did, right? And if you would have bought something back then, if you would have the capital, you would have done a very good deal, right?
Yeah.
Because this was a good time to invest in Berlin, right? But yeah, who knows how things will look like in 15 years again.
Yeah. Well, Thomas, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show. I've been wanting to get you on the show for a while, given your incredible background. So why don't we start there? It would be great if you give us a sort of potted history of your career to date.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to, have the full long story, right? So I just will keep the main things. So what basically happened in my life? I think in the last few years, I've focused on Sellics. Sellics is one of the leading Amazon players. I co-founded the company. I'm the CMO of the company. And what Sellics basically tries to do is just to help brands around the world to really succeed on Amazon. We can talk a little bit about that. Before I founded and joined fully Sellics, I was at Google for almost 10 years. So in Google, I've been many different roles, different areas, different career tracks, right? So a huge amount of experience that I had in Google. Before I joined Google, I was in the startup industry, actually in Berlin. So I worked for different startups. I had my own small business focusing on digital marketing, where I also advised people on digital marketing. I actually founded this already before business school. So just trying to really get very early on in my life into marketing, into digital marketing. And yeah, that's I think in a nutshell what happened. I've also been at business school in Mannheim and also in University of Miami. Also two great experiences. I also always tried to go deeper into the business world.
Excellent. Let's start at Google then. So what did you do when you first landed a job at Google? What was the role like?
Yeah, I mean, I started as many people start that join Google more or less fresh out of university. So I started in sales, so account management, basically focusing on Google AdWords, right? So selling Google AdWords, so not selling, right, but consulting big accounts of how they can invest the money, how can they make more money, right? How they can improve the marketing. So I started on the sales side. And then I moved more and more in my career, close a little bit to the product area, become a product expert for different new solutions. Then I focus on go-to-market of these new products, so how to launch these new products basically across Google and across regions. And then in the last years, I actually fully focused on the travel vertical, the travel industry. And I was really working and founding basically a team that was responsible of getting all of the new cool travel products, from flight search to hotel ads to trips, destinations, all of the special travel products that Google has evolved. My job was basically focusing on really how to bring these products successfully to market.
And did you enjoy your time at Google?
Absolutely. I mean, Google has been is an amazing company. It has been one of the companies that I think is shaping people a lot, right? And I mean, you know this, right? It's a company that has such a strong culture, such a strong history, so many great, amazing people. So I can definitely say that in the almost 10 years that I've been there, this is definitely a time that I would not like to miss. It has been an amazing time there.
And what do you think you learned at Google?
Well, the list probably can go through, thousands of pages, but I think the most important things, right, that I would say that I learned at Google is I learned how to learn, right? I mean, that's probably the main way to put it, because what Google really does, Google has like these, fantastic teams, fantastic structures, fantastic people, fantastic resources that just really help you to basically develop in any way or form that you really want to develop. I think we all leave university and we think we know it all, right? We basically think we're already at a very, very high level and have all of the skills. But then in practice, we don't, right? We're actually still at the beginning, at the very, very early days. And I think what Google is incredibly amazing, or what is incredibly amazing about Google, is that it has full the infrastructure, right? The people, everything, right? When it comes to the trainings, the coaches, the mentorships, all of that, to really guide you in whatever direction you want to go. So I learned from sales to communication, to marketing, to project management, to product management, to stakeholder management, right? And the list goes on and on and on, all of the areas from incredibly talented people. So I think was a crazy learning curve.
So why did you leave to found Sellics?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, people ask sometimes, why the hell would you leave Google, right? It's an amazing company. It's a great culture, great everything, right? You have a very good life there. But also one of the things that I always tried to basically follow while I was at Google was to leave the comfort zone on a continuous way, right? So whenever you feel too comfortable, right, you need to basically change that. You need to challenge it. You need to do something new. Because if you don't do that, right, you get too comfortable, you stop learning, and you don't really develop in the right way that you probably should. And at Google, I mean, I've been there for almost 10 years, and now, of course, we're still learning, right? But at some point, there's just a moment when there might be other opportunities when you just think, okay, if I now go after them, I might actually grow personally, right, and also grow from a professional perspective much more. And just leaving, this very, safe haven, essentially, right, of Google, and going pretty much, into the open world, into the open waters, and trying to really apply everything that you've learned. And for me, after almost 10 years, it was just the right time to basically take on more responsibility, more ownership, and leave the castle.
Well, that reminds me of a quote that a ship is safe in a harbor, but that's not what ships were built for.
Exactly, right. And I think that's a very, very, very good quote, right? That I mean, again, right, you can also learn and obviously challenge yourself in Google all the time. I mean, that's what I did for a very long period of time. But at least for me, and this is of course different for everyone, but for me, after almost 10 years, there was just a moment, when I thought, for me right now, the next best thing is actually outside of Google, right? And to really approach fully new challenges and to go that path.
So tell us a bit more about that challenge. So what exactly does Sellics do, and how did the opportunity arise?
Yeah, good question. I mean, Sellics is a startup, right? So we basically founded it as a bootstrap company, right? So we were 3 people and we had no capital. We basically just founded it. Why did we do it? Because we have seen already that Amazon was growing and growing and growing. And not just Amazon was growing, a full ecosystem was growing. So there were more and more brands. There were more and more sellers actively on Amazon trying to sell stuff, but there was nothing for them. Right. So I start to sell when back in the days when we, knew each other, if you remember, right? I was buying NFC tags from Asia and trying to sell them on eBay, trying to sell them on Amazon just to get a better understanding of e-commerce. So that's something that I always try to do, just trying to understand how different industries work. And back in the days, there was no software for anyone selling on Amazon. There was no education for anyone selling on Amazon. If you search back in the days for Amazon SEO, right, because you obviously want that your product appears at the top, there was literally nothing. And this was then in the end, the beginning of Sellics, because we thought, okay, there are now already hundreds of thousands of businesses selling on Amazon, but there's literally nothing helping them. There's no education. There's no company. There's no tracking. There's no nothing. People wrote down in a handwritten way, what's my ranking on Amazon, right? Every day. I did it myself, right? So this was basically the old days. And Sellics in the end was the goal to change that. So we founded a company that in the end was fully focusing on trying to help Amazon sellers, Amazon brands to be more successful on Amazon. And we started very small, right? We made lots of MVPs, lots of tests. We really wanted to ensure that there is need, right, for all of this, and that there's also a way that people would pay for it. So the first year was just Excel sheets and testing and back and forth. And only if we saw that what we actually did was really adding value to the market, we started to scale up the company. And this worked incredibly well. Sellics has grown basically from the 3 initial people up to 120 people. We opened an office in Berlin. We opened an office in New York. We scaled across both continents. We invested in many, many different things. We also obviously expanded the product portfolio. And this is where we are today, right? So the story is still continuing. But overall, the initial idea was just, hey, there is a problem and we might be the right people to solve it.
Fantastic. And you have hundreds and hundreds of Amazon sellers now using your platform, right?
Thousands, yes.
Thousands.
Many. Yeah. So Sellics is one of it's the top 3, right, around the world when it comes to also Amazon advertising, which is now a much bigger topic. So 6-7 years ago, it was basically just selling on Amazon. Now it's also much more the full advertising ecosystem. If you search on anything on Amazon, you will see ads around, the search results page, the product detail page. So ads are everywhere. So advertising, right, is becoming more and more important. Not a big surprise, right? But also Sellics is one of the biggest players in that space.
Fantastic. So let's now move on to understanding your tips and tricks for getting into the industries in which you've worked. So let's kick off with Google. So what would you say to a business school graduate who's looking to get into Google?
Well, what I would say, I think the most important thing is to really ask yourself the question, why do you want to get there, right? And if you already have a good answer for that question, that this answer will normally guide you right through the full preparation process and will ensure that you're actually ready for that. So my personal experience or my personal story, I actually wanted to go to Google when I joined business school. Already in my first semester, right? People are asking yourself, hey, where do you want to work later, right? What do you want to do? And I was the guy who said, I want to work at Google, right? And everyone was like, how do you know, right? Why Google? Google was back then not such a big company, right? So it's 2005, 2006. And But I was very clear I want to go to Google because I read about Google in the news. I heard that they have like this very different approach in terms of culture. You don't need to be serious, right, in order to be successful and all of that. So they fully changed many things. And, this resonated very well to me, right? And I really said, okay, I really can identify myself with this culture. And then what I basically did, through the following years is to go much deeper already into Google SEO and Google advertising and all of that. And when I then finished business school, I actually first joined to the startups in Berlin because I thought that I have no chances to get into Google, right? Because I thought, I don't have enough experience yet, right? So I will not apply. But then Google actually reached out to me, right? Because they saw already on my CV that this guy has lots of experience in SEO and advertising, right? Lots of stuff that already I have done by then in that age. And they asked me that I should apply. I did, right? And obviously things have worked out. And why have they worked out? Because I basically prepared for this interview for a very long time, right? I prepared in terms of the knowledge, the know-how, the culture. So when the interviews happened, they were very naturally, right? Because for me, this was not, I didn't need to make something up, right? It was very clear to me why I really want to get a job at Google, right? And where I think that I can add value to this company. And this is what I just would recommend everyone, right? So whenever you just want to have a job somewhere, really ask yourself the question, why do you want to work there? And then really also invest the time to get the know-how, to get really, your mind clear. What is your motivation? How can you add value there? And then this will also ensure a very good preparation for the interviews.
That's a great answer. One of the things that we always say in our boot camps is, if you want to go and work at a big tech company, by all means apply directly to that big tech company. But what you might also want to consider is, working in a business that is either interfacing with that big tech company or sitting on top of that big tech company, just like you did in Berlin. Like if you can get real practical experience of using the tools in a everyday business setting, then you're going to be really, really well primed for the interview.
Exactly, right. I mean, if you already have in your CV that, let's assume you want to work at Google and you've done already many things that are connected to Google, that's a big plus. The same thing if you want to get into Amazon and you've done already many things around Amazon, right? That's a big plus. If you want to get into Facebook, into Apple, into Uber, wherever, right? Whatever experience you already have will be incredibly beneficial because this is basically a preparation. You will know the topics, you will know the industry, you will in many ways also learn some stuff about the culture. So it's a big plus if you have already some kind of information background there.
And you must have done many interviews when you were at Google. What would you say to people who have interviews coming up? Like what can they do to really ace that interview?
Yeah, I mean, of course, if you now have the interview next week, right, then you're probably going to change, your full life. And then I think that the most important thing in any interview is literally preparation, right? I think preparation is such an important thing. And I'm always stunned by the fact that still, you have people that go into the interview and they just basically prepare a few hours, right? Or they prepare a day or something. But if it would be an exam at the university, they would prepare weeks, right? But for the job interview, they prepare a day. The job interview might change your life. It very likely will change your life. It will be successful. It will fully disrupt everything, right, that you've done so far. The one exam in university, probably not. And that's why I always recommend people, if you have an interview at a company and you really, you want to get the job, and that's, by the way, only the interviews that you should have, invest the time, right? Invest the time to really prepare this properly. Really think that this is the most important exam of your life. Invest the resources, invest and commit to it. Research as much as possible. There's so much out there, so much information out there in the web. If you would just search for experiences, job questions, whatever it is, right? Just do it, research it, get your mind clear on all the common questions that might be asked. And this will increase your chances significantly. I think 80% of any given interview in any company can be basically prepared. The remaining 20% probably not, but the first 80%, it's all about preparation. And this is something that I've seen many times in my life, right? That people absolutely neglect.
I couldn't agree more. In terms of succeeding at Google, and I guess this can also apply to other, big tech companies, and indeed, other management consultancy companies that are becoming more and more about digital transformation. What would your tips be there?
I mean, when it comes to succeeding in any job, right, or in any career ladder, right, I think the most important thing in the end is performance. That's the most important thing. I think if you are really excelling at your job, right, if you're doing a very good job, then this is the foundation. It's not the only thing, right? There are also other things that will be required for you to really make advancements on a regular way, especially the bigger the company. There are also certain element of stakeholder management or politics and all these kind of stuff. But overall, the foundation is performance, right? And I think if whenever, it doesn't matter which job you have, if you focus on doing a really, really good job, right? And if you then ensure that your manager knows that you're doing a really, really good job, if you then also help your manager to ensure that everyone else that might be in the decision line, right, to ensure that you actually can advance in your position, knows that you're doing a very good job, then this already goes a long way. Because the main things that I've seen also in my life is that people neglect one of the two things, right? They either invest too much of basically selling what they're doing, but actually not focusing on really driving value for the company. And this is not very sustainable. Or they're only focusing on creating value for the company and generating impact for the company, but they are neglecting the fact that other people should know about this, right? So you need to ensure that they know about this, that they talk about this, and that everyone actually is fully aware. So it's always a combination of these two things. And what a good performance is, right, is also something which I see many people get wrong. It is something that I would highly, highly, highly recommend anyone to really take this question seriously, right? And spend time with your manager, right? Spend time with your director, spend time with whoever is in your reporting line, and ask these people the question, right? What is an amazing, fantastic performance? What do I really need to do that you will say, this was amazing, right? This was great. And this will already help you to look at the right direction.
Because we lived together, right? When we worked at Google, and I was always amazed at just how many sort of extracurricular activities you were able to achieve outside of your core role. So I remember, me and my other housemate would be, watching Netflix, and you'd be, at your computer over an Excel file, like building all of these new data-driven tools that would really go on to help, Google advertisers. So it feels like in your definition of performance, we've also got to include the non-core stuff to really stand out. It can be, right, a very critical element, and it definitely has been for me, right? So for me, it was always, getting the core job right, but also doing other things, right, where I really thought that I can add a significant value to the company. But it's not always required, right? Not everyone, does stuff outside of, let's say, the norm, right? In many ways, you also can have a normal, let's say, very good and strong career if you just excel at your core job, right? Again and again and again. And this is normally also a very, very good way to progress. But it's true that in the end, right, if you really want to get a promotion, if you want to basically get higher up in the career ladder, the simple truth is you need to be better than everyone else, right? Or you need to be part of the top 10, 20%. That's how it normally works, right? Not everyone will get a promotion, right? Some people will get a promotion. Some people will get at some point a promotion. Some people will never get a promotion. And in order to really get promotions on and on and on, you just need to be at the top. And this can be by excelling at the core job. It can be by doing stuff beyond the norm, right? Where people would just say, crazy, I've never seen something like this. That's, redefining the way how we thought about this. So this definitely can be something like that. And it can be a combination of these two, but it needs to be better, right? It needs to be definitely, you need to aim for the question, because you should not forget, if you're working at a company like Google or Amazon or Facebook or wherever, they're all good people. They're all very good people. And when you arrive there, it means you're one out of many very, very good people. And if you now still want to make a very, very fast career, you still need to ask yourself the question, what can you do, right, to really get these promotions if you really want to have them? It feels to me like one of the ways that you stood out was your ability to build things in Microsoft Excel. So it feels like you were able to prototype sort of data-driven tools quite quickly and show real value. Could you tell the audience a little bit about the Prof X project, and then also how the things that you learned from that project have gone on to inform the benchmarker tool that is front and center in the Sellics product portfolio?
Sure. I mean, the main thing, or basically when it comes to my personal, philosophies or principles when it comes to how to approach problems, is I try to solve them, right? I try to understand how to solve them in a best possible way. And then I try, how can I scale this, right? How can I scale this in such a way that this can be used by ideally everyone, right? So everything that requires manual work again and again and again is normally not the best way to solve it. And in all of these, examples that happen in Google, right? That happened in the early years of Google, but they happened a couple of times throughout my full journey at Google. There was always a certain problem, right? People wanted to know something, but they did not know, right, how to do it. In this case, right, it was not very clear how to describe a potential consumer, right? Demographics, age, interest, all of that. It was not very clear. There were many ways, as of today, that you can basically target specific audiences in the web, but it was not very clear how, in the end, could you do that. Then thinking about a solution, right? A solution might be we just look at different data sources which we might have if we can answer that question. Luckily, there were different data sources available, which, if you did some analysis that were a little bit creative, right, of how to approach the problem, you could figure out that for specific segments, some interests were much more relevant than for others, right? And so using data to solve a problem, I think is a very, very big component here. It's something which I think is one of the still most important things, right? What you should always think of. Is there any data source which can help you to solve the problem? And then using this data source to solve that problem. But then you're not done, because then you basically just have one problem. Then you need to think, how can you now solve 100,000 of these type of problems, right? And this is then basically when the full scaling comes into play. So I used Excel when we lived together, right, for the first iteration, basically, right? So I used it to create a prototype, to use data to answer different problems, right? Which analysis can we do? Which formulas can we use to really get an insight, which can really help us here? But then as soon as this was working and basically an MVP was existing, a minimum valuable product that really was able to help here, then always the question was, okay, how can we now scale this, right? How can we fully automate this and create this 10,000s of times, 100,000s of times, millions of times? And this is the last important piece, because only that last piece is the one that will really drive impact. If you're solving one problem, amazing, right? But if you're solving 100,000 times the problem, this is when we have impact. And that's why I think that the general mentality of looking at a problem, is there any data, right, which might help to solve this problem, using this data to solve the problem, and then thinking about how can I now scale this, right, to a huge amount of people.
It feels to me like the learning that you experienced around developing that tool in Google has been really useful to how you've approached tools in Sellics, because you have this benchmarker tool which really helps Amazon sellers benchmark their own performance against other Amazon sellers. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's it's like with many things in life, right? As soon as you basically start a certain thing, and this is also why this is such an important part of this learning journey, you start to see patterns again and again and again, right? And you get some kind of feeling to see problems, right? You see problems, you see, this could be done better. And in the case of the benchmarker, for example, which we developed at Sellics, there was the very common problem that people, when they do advertising, they have a performance, right? They have certain conversion rates, they have certain click-through rates, they have CPCs, they have profit margins and all of that. but they don't know, is this good or bad? And if they don't know if this is good or bad, then they also don't know what should they focus on. And focus is a very, 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 very important part of any business. You need to know where should you focus on. And if you don't know where the problem is, you don't know where you should focus on. And this is a problem that everyone has. And if you now have a way to answer or to help someone with this problem, then you could add or create a huge amount of value. And that's what the benchmarker is doing. Because what we did with the benchmarker, we just calculated for all of these numbers, benchmarks. Now, benchmarks are only as good as they're calculated, right? So we really try to calculate them with the best statistical models on a country level, on a category level, on the ad format level. So really broke it down into over 20,000 different subcategories on Amazon, so that whatever you're selling on Amazon, we can give you a very, very, very good idea of what is good and what is bad in that specific area. And this will help you to really understand where you should focus on. And again, the principle was the same thing, right? This was a problem that I faced myself many, many times, that everyone faces many times. Then asking the question, might there be some data to help, right? In the case of Sellics, because Sellics is one of the biggest players in the industry, there was, right? So we had enough data. And then using these data sources to calculate something or to do something that can really help you really made a difference. So the principle is the same thing, right? So being just sensitive for the problem, then trying to figure out which data can I use to solve the problem, and then trying to understand how can I now ensure that this problem is solved millions of times.
Brilliant. Well, that's a nice segue into my next question, which is around books. So are there any, or is there a book that has really influenced you in your journey so far?
I would say there were many books, right, which clearly influenced me. But I would say one book that I always, think of back, the most when it comes from a business professional context would be The 7 Habits of Highly Effective and Efficient People. This was a book which I probably read in my, second year or so at Google. And it was a time, where all of us, we are very busy. We have so many things to do. The day, unfortunately, only has 24 hours, right? But you would love to do more and more and more, but, you cannot. And so efficiency and effectiveness, right, was coming more and more on my mind, because I thought, how can you make things just better and faster? And this is where I think this book came in very handy, because it really helped. It talks about these 7 general principles, which I think are very, very helpful, and which, are just a door opener to many other topics than derive from that. But just really having a better focus on how can you make things better, faster, I think is a key part, right, of any successful career, because it will happen naturally that you will have too much work on your table every day, right? So to really, really get better here, you either need to do these things faster, or you need to focus on the right things. And I think this book really helps you with the foundations.
Great. Well, I'll make sure to link to it at the bottom of the show notes. And is there a quote that you have also found really useful on your journey?
Yeah, I think the quote that probably guided me the most over the years was from Steve Jobs, right? So not such a surprise answer probably, right? But I mean the quote that he had when he said, "Stay hungry, stay foolish," right? I think this is what he basically said in one of his speeches, and I think there is so much truth in this statement, and I can really just emphasize that the point that both of these elements, right, of this quote are critical. So stay hungry, which basically means never stop, right? So life is a journey. It's not a destination. Career is a journey. It's not a destination. And always leaving the comfort zone. If you're too comfortable with what you do, that's it, right? So always stay hungry, search for more. It needs to be a force. Whenever you think that you have a very chilled and relaxed day, and then it's a chilled and relaxed week, and then it's a chilled and relaxed month, that's a bad thing, right? So you need to really, really stay hungry, and always ask yourself the question, okay, how can I learn more, get better, right? And then really, really go into new areas, expand, grow. This is, I think, a key part. And the second element of this quote, right, stay foolish, I think is also very important because it has a lot to do with taking mistakes, right? I think one of the other things that I've also observed throughout the years is that there's a big difference when it comes to risk profiles of different people. And I think those that are much more willing to take risks, in most cases, right, will advance further because they're learning. It's not that everything that they do succeeds, right? Many things will never succeed, but they also can learn from it, right? And this is something that it will just bring them on and on and on. So having this mindset of stay foolish, which just basically means just try it out, right? Don't be afraid. Just see what happens. Of course, not with everything, right? But with many things, just see what happens, try it out, make a test out of this, right? And having this mentality, I think, is absolutely critical. And these two combined, right? Being very hungry for more, right? In any sense or in any way, right? How you can basically look at this word, but also all the time, right? Taking risks and seeing, what can you test? What can you experiment? Don't be afraid, just do stuff. And this will, in most cases, guide you in the right direction.
It reminds me of Jeff Bezos's concept to always have a beginner's mindset. Particularly the stay foolish component. And whenever he goes into a new industry, he says, we will always go into a new industry with a beginner's mindset because that's how you learn and that's how you approach things with an entirely different perspective.
Exactly. It's that day one mentality, right? We basically say whatever we do it just at the beginning. And it's the same concept as this, if you think about, stay hungry. Never become too comfortable.
And the last question I want to ask, Thomas, is around interview questions. So what is your favorite interview question that you like to ask? And then how would you yourself answer it?
My favorite question that I ask to people and how I would answer it myself.
Yeah.
So in terms of, I think in terms of feedback questions, I think one thing that definitely is always, for me, a very insightful question is the question, what is the most entrepreneurial thing that you've ever done in your life? Right? So the question basically, was there anything, right, where you took a risk, right, where you did have an innovative idea, where you kind of tried to build something, right? So really getting some grasp, right? Was there already something? What did you do? And then, of course, how did it work out? And it's not so much if this was successful or not, right? It's more about the process and how someone thinks about it. I think can be very insightful because, again, I think, in my personal opinion, it is so important to have this executor, doer mentality, right? Taking risks. And there are many ways that you can show this, but one of the best ways to really show this is just to see if people already did something like this in their life. And if yes, what was it?
How would you answer that question?
Well, I actually got, I think, the question even at Google, asked in, probably a comparable way. And what I basically said is back then, the most entrepreneurial thing that I did was organizing. I tried to organize a yacht party when I studied in Miami, between Miami and Cuba. And I tried to make a business out of this, right? And this was obviously, I was young, right? It was a very, very, cool idea from my perspective back in the days, but it was also a big risk, right? And the end of the story is this never happened, right? Because in the end, right, we did not get the yacht, right? We did not get the boat, and we needed then to fully, return the money to basically everyone, right, that already paid the tickets and all of this, right? So this never happened. But the story itself, I think, was very insightful, right? It was very insightful for me because I learned a lot, right, about big dreams, big goals, learning, risk-taking. Also, if something does not go wrong, how do you deal with this, right? And really, really having this full process like in a very short period of time, right, of doing something very big and basically failing. I think just with these kind of things, you can already learn a lot.
Excellent. I didn't know about your yacht dreams. I knew about your NFC tag dreams, but yeah, the yacht one is new to my ears. Great. Well, they're all my questions, Thomas, but we do have a few from our community. So one of the perks of joining the Exacto community is you get to ask our podcast guest questions. So we have 3 questions that I'd like you to answer. The first comes from a guy called Austin, and he says, moving from one vertical, i.e. travel, to another, what was the biggest difficulty or knowledge gap to overcome? And do you have any tips for making a similar transition?
It's a good question. So I definitely, focused on Google on travel, especially in my last 5 years. But I also worked in different verticals before. So I worked in finance, I worked in B2B, I worked for retail, right? I worked for tech. So I did many, many different verticals in Google. And this actually, was incredibly insightful to me because many people think that an industry is incredibly different, right? If you work in finance, it's very different than retail, e-commerce, it's very different than travel, it's very different than B2B, very different local, et cetera, et cetera. And they are different, don't get me wrong. But there are also many, many, many similarities. And there are many dynamics which are happening in every industry in a slightly different way, but very, very comparable. And the more you have worked in different industries, the more you will see them. And sometimes it will even help you to see new opportunities, because in some areas, the travel industry might be already more advanced. In some other areas, the retail industry might be more advanced, and they can learn from both. So for me, the industry itself was never a big, let's say, challenge or an issue, because this was something that I think you can actually learn relatively fast. The big players, the small players, the business models, the ecosystems, these are normally not they're not too difficult in most cases. And if you learn one industry, you can learn also the other industry in most cases quite quickly. So I would not be scared, right, of changing the industry. And whenever I hired people and I saw that they only had experience in a different industry, this was for me never like a big no. It was just for me, okay, what did you learn there? And do you think you can learn this here as well? So it's more about how fast can you pick up new things and how fast can you learn. This in most cases plays a much bigger role than if you have a certain experience in an industry.
Great. The second question is from a woman called Crystal, and she says, if you had to pick 3 things you've learned during your time at Google that helped you develop a successful business, what would they be?
3 things. Yeah, good question, Crystal. I like that you're asking for 3 things, right? People can only remember 3 things. So it's a good way to ask only 3. The first thing that I would definitely say is culture. Culture. Don't underestimate the power of the culture. If you just worked in one business in your life, you probably will think every business works like that. But the truth is they work all very differently. And cultures can be incredibly different. If you just compare the Google culture to the Amazon culture, to the Apple culture, to the Microsoft culture, it's like different universes, right? They all almost have, nothing to do. They have some similarities, but the way how people work, how they operate, how they treat each other, very different. So I think culture is a key component. And you don't, of course, Google didn't teach me that the Google culture is the most superior one, but it taught me how important it is, right? And how powerful it is. So I think that's the first thing that I would say. The second thing that I would say that I probably learned the most at Google is of how important it is to really think big. Google started at this obviously very, very small startup, right? But they had already in the early days, they had this big mission, right? We want to organize the world's information and want to make it accessible, right? That's a big thing. Right? As a small startup, you just want to probably, change the world basically with that, right? And I think this is just something which you always should also try to have. Don't aim low, aim high, right? Try to really think in your own business, what is the biggest potential thing that you can reach here? And then you can break it down into smaller things. But the mission and the vision needs to be very, very, very high. needs to be the North Star that really drives the full thing. So I think thinking big is another thing which I definitely can state here. And I think the third thing, which I think was probably the most important, among the most important things I learned at Google, is that it pays off so much to invest in something that is called growth culture, right? Or growth mindset culture. So basically a culture that encourages everyone to learn and develop every day. So it's not so important how good or bad you are today. It's much more important how good or bad you are tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. So really investing in this mindset that you can learn, that you can grow, and creating an environment that really helps you, right, and fosters this development curve, I think is so key. I think Google did an amazing job here of creating a growth culture. And this is definitely something where every business around the world can benefit from, of just thinking about how can you help the people across the company to continuously develop, grow, and basically get better every day.
Fabulous. And the third question comes from a guy called Chibuze, and he says, what challenges can be expected from transitioning from a product manager role at a bank to a product manager role in a tech company? What could the potential knowledge gaps be, and how can they be overcome ahead of applications to these roles?
Yeah, it's a very generic question, right? Because I think the industry, right, in this case, tech versus let's say bank/finance, is of course one factor, but there are thousands of more factors, right? It depends on the size of the company, it depends on the culture of the company, it depends on the size of the team, it depends on with who will you work? Are you the only one? Are there many others, right? So there are many more important questions than basically just bank versus tech. There are clearly some indications, right, that probably if you move over more to tech versus, let's say, the finance industry, that you also will move into a more dynamic environment, right? That's normally, let's say, a common truth that will happen in many cases, not all cases, right, but in many cases, that will happen there, which means that anything that will help you in terms of staying more agile, right? So different agile frameworks to work in a dynamic environment, I think can be helpful here, because let's say many of the, let's say, very traditional, in quotations, old business models, they still operate, especially when it comes to product development, on a much, let's say, lower pace with more structures, right? More processes, many more stakeholders. If you compare this to, let's say, the new way of how many new startups, tech companies, etc., operate, where stuff like Scrum and everything like this plays a much bigger role, where you just need to get your head around how can you now work in a fast-paced environment and iterate on products quickly. Because in most cases, it depends obviously on the tech product, but the requirements for most tech products are different than for a finance product. Finance is a lot about security and about trust, but in tech, it's a lot about innovation, it's about pace. And so there's a different way how to think about these things.
Thanks so much, Thomas. We covered so much ground there, and I'm super confident that our audience is going to get so much value from all the things that we discussed. So great to see you again, and hopefully catch you soon in Berlin.
Thank you so much, Freddie. Thank you for being here.
Take care.
See ya.
Bye.